Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we've got a story for you that is just mind-blowing. It's about a teenager who fell 2 miles, that's right, 2 miles, from a plane that was falling apart in mid-air, and somehow she lived. I mean, how do you even survive a fall from 10,000 feet? It sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But this actually happened. And believe me, what happened after she hit the ground, well, that part of the story might be even more unbelievable. Okay, so I want you to keep this number in mind, 14. Just tuck it away. It seems random now, I know. But by the end of this, you're going to see how this simple number represents the absolute razor's edge between life and death. All right, let's set the scene. The date is December 24th, 1971, Christmas Eve, a day that's supposed to be all about joy and family. Instead, we're on Lanza Flight 508, flying high above the jungles of the Peruvian Amazon. And, well, things are about to go horribly wrong. So on this plane is a 17-year-old girl, Juliane, and her mom. All they want to do is get home for Christmas. The problem? They're on an airline, Lanza, that had let's just say, a terrible reputation. Seriously, the local nickname for it basically translated to Lanza falls on its belly. Not exactly reassuring. And the plane they were on, a Lockheed Electra. Great for deserts, not so great for the crazy turbulence you get over mountain ranges. But, it was the holidays, every other flight was booked. This was their only shot. And this is where a fateful decision was made. The pilots saw a massive thunderstorm ahead, and instead of going around it, they went through it. The plane started shaking violently. We're talking Christmas presents flying out of the overhead bins. And then, a brilliant, blinding flash. A bolt of lightning hits the right wing, right on the fuel tank. Instantly, the wing is on fire. It just rips off. The whole plane begins to disintegrate. Imagine this. 1 second, there's the roar of the engines and chaos, and the next, silence. Just the sound of wind rushing past. That's what 17-year-old Juliane heard as she was thrown from the plane, still strapped to her seat, falling 10,000 feet. She later said that looking down at the endless jungle canopy, it looked just like a field of broccoli. So the big question, right? How in the world did she survive that fall? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was this incredible, almost impossible combination of factors. First, the thunderstorm itself had these powerful updrafts, winds blowing upwards that actually slowed her down. Then, the whole row of seats she was strapped to started spinning, kind of like one of those helicopter seeds from a maple tree, and that acted like a parachute, slowing her down even more. And the final piece of the puzzle, the jungle itself, that dense canopy of trees and vines acted like a giant safety net, breaking her fall. She must have blacked out on the way down, because the next thing she knew, she was waking up on the jungle floor. And it's Christmas morning. Talk about a grim way to wake up on Christmas. She's got a broken collarbone, a sprained knee, a concussion, her eye is swollen shut, and there's no one. She is totally, terrifyingly alone. But here's the thing, and this is so important. Juliane wasn't your average teenager. Her parents were zoologists, and they actually founded a research station called Penguana, right there in the Amazon. She had spent years living there. So for her, the jungle wasn't just some big, scary place. It was familiar. She understood it. Still, her situation was just awful. I mean, what did she have to survive on? A single sandal, a bunch of painful injuries, and a small bag of candy she managed to find. That's it. That was her food source. She called out for her mom, for anyone, but all she heard back was the sound of the jungle. Okay, so this is where her unique upbringing really comes into play. Let's get into how she used that knowledge to navigate a place that, for anyone else, would have been a death sentence. So she's lost, she's hurt, she's all alone. But she remembered one crucial piece of advice her dad had given her. It became everything to her. Her game plan, her mantra, really her only hope. And this was not a short ordeal. We're talking days and days. On day 4, she stumbled upon something just horrific. Another row of seats with 3 other passengers. She had to force herself to check if her mother was one of them. She wasn't. And somehow, Juliane found the strength to just keep going, pushing through the pain, the hunger, everything. Can you even imagine the mental strength that took? The days just started to blend together. The hunger was constant. At times, she could hear rescue planes flying way up above, but the canopy was just too thick. They couldn't see her. So the only thing she had, the only thing that kept her sane, was repeating her father's words over and over, follow the water. It was the one thing she could control. And then, Just when you think things can't possibly get any worse, they do. She had a pretty nasty gash on her arm, and flies laid eggs in it. Soon, it was infested with maggots. She counted something like 30 of them burrowing into her arm. Now, on top of everything else, she's facing a serious, probably deadly infection. And she's completely alone. So we're on day 9. 9 days of walking, of wading through water, sometimes just floating to save energy. She is physically and emotionally just broken. And then she sees something. Something she's sure can't be real.
It's a small boat tied to the riverbank. She's so weak and hungry at this point, she's positive she's hallucinating. But she makes herself move towards it, reaches out her hand, and touches it. It's real. And there's a little path leading from the boat up to a small, empty hut.
This is where her knowledge kicks in one last time, and it's a big one. Inside the hut, she finds a container of gasoline. And she remembers seeing her father use gasoline to treat their dog's worm infestation. So she pours the gasoline on her own arm. The pain, she said, was excruciating. But it worked. It forced the maggots out. At that point, she was just too weak to move. Her only option was to wait and hope someone came back. So later that evening, 3 lumberjacks show up. And you have to put yourself in their shoes for a second. They walk up to their remote hut and see this ghostly figure. She's incredibly thin. Her hair is a mess. One eye is swollen shut. They were absolutely terrified. They thought she was a yakumama, which is a mythical water spirit from their folklore that's, well, not friendly. But then, with what little energy she had, she spoke to them in Spanish. She told them her name and that she was from the plane crash. And just like that, their fear was gone. They realized this wasn't some forest spirit. This was the girl from the Lonza plane crash, the girl everyone assumed was dead. Her rescue, after 11 brutal days, was a massive international story. But this is really not the end of her story. In a lot of ways, her survival was the beginning of a whole new chapter of her life. And this is where we come back to that number I told you to remember, 14. It's just a heartbreaking detail. Investigators figured out later that 14 other people had actually survived the fall. 14! But they all stayed with the wreckage, waiting to be rescued. A rescue that tragically never found them in time. They all died out there. Juliane's choice to move, to use her knowledge, to just refuse to give up, that was literally the difference between life and death. So what happened to Juliane? Well, she followed in her parents' footsteps and became a respected zoologist. She went back to Peru, and she ended up taking over that research station, Panguana, that her parents had started. She's dedicated her whole life to studying and protecting the exact same rainforest that almost took her life, but in the end, saved it. You know, when you really look at it, her story is so much more than just an insane survival tale. It's a huge lesson in resilience, right, and the power of knowledge. But it also kind of leaves you with this bigger thought. How can the absolute worst thing that happens to you, the thing that almost breaks you completely, end up shaping your entire purpose in life?